Hey everyone, welcome to The Savoring. I'm Jimmy. In this video, I'm going to be cooking this beautiful brisket that I have right here, low and slow, Texas style, on my Traeger pellet smoker. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get this thing unwrapped and trimmed. This is a Packer style brisket, so it's got a lot of fat that I'm going to want to trim off of it. So to do this, I'm going to put a sheet of foil down over my cutting board so that I don't get blood all over my cutting board. So let's get this thing unwrapped. Okay, so here we are all unwrapped. It's time to start trimming. The top here is pretty trimmed down. It doesn't have a whole lot of fat, but I'm going to take a few of these little loose pieces off. So briskets have a big chunk of hard fat right here on the top. I used to trim it all the way down out of there, but it left a big cavity in the meat and juice would form in there. So what I do now is just sort of trim it down to where it's flat with the rest of the surface. That will render down some. It won't render completely out of there, but it will render down some. So now I'm going to flip it over and work on the back side. This layer of fat on the bottom is pretty thick. I want to take it down to about 1/4 inch thick. Right now it looks to be right here about 1 inch thick, and as I go in it gets a little thinner, but it's a little inconsistent and it's super thick, so I'm going to take some of this fat down. If you cut a little too deep every now and then like that, that's okay. If you expose some of the meat, it's okay, because there's still plenty of fat on here, so there's no problem there. I've never had that cause an issue for me. This brisket has a big ridge of hard fat running all along this side, so I'm going to basically take that whole ridge off. All right, so that right there looks pretty good. I got a little bit deep right here and took a little bit more fat off than what I really wanted to, and here, but that's okay. And right here, that's okay. It's still gonna be perfectly fine, still gonna form a nice bark, still gonna have plenty of fat on here to keep the meat nice and moist. And I like to cook my briskets with the fat side up. I know there's a big debate about that. Some people say fat side down, some people say fat side up, but I find that cooking it fat side up works the best for me. So right now I'd say this side looks pretty good. I'm going to flip it over, we're going to clean up the board, and we're going to start seasoning this thing. So one thing that I almost forgot is I need to trim this brisket up to give it a nicer shape. So this flat end down here is a little thin and it's a little squared off, so I'm going to cut just like this here, come around here and come around this corner just to sort of round this flat off some. So now we have a brisket that's nice and rounded on both sides. It should cook pretty evenly. There's not any super thin sections down here on this end. Okay, so now I'm ready to season the brisket. I'm going to use a mixture of kosher salt, coarse black pepper, and garlic. That's what I've got in this bowl right here, and I'm just going to liberally apply it to the whole surface of the brisket. We're going to start with the top. So I'm just going to coat this thing. This is what's going to help make a nice crust on there. I don't use a binder when I season my brisket. I know a lot of people use binders, mustard, some people use mustard, some people use olive oil. I don't use anything. I find that if I just put the seasoning on there and pack it on there by hand and then let it sit for a little while, it tends to soak in really nicely and stick to the brisket really well. I've never had an issue. So I'm just going to press it into the meat. And you want to liberally cover this whole thing, including the sides. We're going to get the sides in a second. This is going to build loads and loads of flavor on this thing as it smokes. All right, let me flip this thing over and get the underside. And while I'm at it, I think I'll hit those sides a little bit. You can see on this top side where I started seasoning first, the seasoning's already sort of starting to soak into the meat. Okay, so here's our brisket all nicely seasoned. The next step is to get the smoker fired up to 250 degrees while this thing rests and soaks in all this flavor from the seasoning. So to smoke this brisket, I'm gonna be using the Traeger signature blend of pellets, which is basically, according to the packages, maple, cherry, and artisanal hardwood blend. I usually have good luck with it. It creates a nice smoke ring and gives my brisket a nice smoky flavor. So it's been about 20 minutes and the smoker has reached its target temperature, so now it's time to put the brisket on. This is gonna be an overnight cook, so what I'm gonna do is put the brisket on and we'll check on it again in about 4 hours. All right, so now it's time to put the brisket on. I'm gonna put it fat side up, straight down on the smoker, and we're gonna let it go for about 4 hours before I check it. I'm just gonna let the smoke do its thing. So there it is on the smoker, fat side up. We're gonna let it go. So here we are at 4 hours. We don't really have the color and the bark that we're looking for yet. So we're gonna wait about another couple of hours before we wrap this thing. So for now, I'm just gonna let it go for a couple of more hours and we'll come back and check on it then. Now after about 6 hours, we've reached an internal temperature of 175. Got a nice bark formed on the outside of this brisket. So at this point, it's time to take it off the smoker, wrap it in pink butcher paper, and put it back on the smoker. Also, I've inserted a wireless probe into the flat of the brisket, so that's how I know that it's 175 internal. So I'm gonna get it off and get it wrapped. I put down 2 layers of the pink butcher paper. I'm gonna wrap the brisket up. I'm gonna start with the fat side down, which I actually cooked the brisket with the fat side up. So I'm gonna start with the fat side down so that when I'm done rolling, I end up with the fat side up again. You just want to wrap it tight. And I'm going to make sure that my temperature probe sticks out from the paper. Fold the sides in, flip it over. Now I've got my fat side up just like I was cooking from the beginning, and I'm going to put it back on the smoker until we reach an internal temperature of about 203 or so. Really, you want to go off of how it feels, and we'll talk about that later, but for now I'm just going to put it back on the smoker. So the internal temperature of the brisket has reached 203, so it's right where we want it. I'm going to use another Insta-Read thermometer just to probe into the meat and see if it feels nice and tender. So let me do that now. Go into the point. Ooh, it feels like there's almost no resistance in that point whatsoever. I would say that point is definitely fully cooked. All the fat inside there's rendered down. It feels very soft. It feels like I'm really literally going into nothing, pretty much. So let me try the flat. I got another hole here for the flat. And the flat has a little more resistance, which is normal for a brisket flat. It's got some resistance, but I can tell just by sticking this in there, it's super tender. So I'd say this brisket is ready to come off of the smoker and rest for several hours. The brisket's been resting for a good solid 4 hours, so it's time to unwrap it and see what it looks like. All right, let's get this thing unwrapped. Ooh, look at all that juice on the bottom. This thing is just full of juice. It's gonna be super juicy, I can already tell. I'm gonna try to unwrap this thing without making a huge mess. Sort of just roll my paper up while I unwrap it. Wow. This is gonna be one juicy brisket. See if I can set it on my board with the fat side down. We cooked it with the fat side up, but we're going to set it on the board with the fat side down. Okay, there we are. Let me just get this out of the way. Set this back here. Let me just flip this around and show you guys. We've got some amazing bark formed on this brisket. I can't wait to cut into this thing and see what it looks like. Look at that jiggle. How this thing's going to be super tender, I can already tell. Okay, so I've got my mega slicer out. I'm gonna slice this thing open. I'm gonna cut it about 2/3 of the way down towards the point. We're gonna slice this bad boy open and see what it looks like. Here we go. Oh man, this thing is just gonna fall apart, I can already tell. Wow. This thing is gonna be amazing. Let's take a look right here. Look at that nice smoke ring from the smoker. Oh, mate, look at all that juice coming out. I cannot wait to try a bite of this brisket. Wow, look at that, it's so juicy. Okay, I gotta get a slice of this. I cannot wait to try this brisket. I don't think it's gonna hold together though. I'm gonna try to get a thin slice, but I don't know if it's even gonna hold together. Let me flip this piece around. I'm gonna cut just a nice thin slice off of right here. This thing is absolutely just falling apart. You know, I know a lot of the barbecue competitions say your brisket has to have some hang to it if you put it across your finger. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think I like my brisket to where it falls apart. Look at that, I can't even pick it up. I can't even pick that slice up. It's just absolutely falling apart. This is crazy. I almost can't even grab a piece of it. Let's try a piece of this. So good. The beefy flavor, the flavor of that bark on the outside, and all that salt and pepper that we put on there is just amazing. The juiciness and the tenderness is just, it just comes apart. It just pulls right apart. It's so amazing. I don't think brisket could get much better than this right here, honestly. This is just amazing. Trust me guys, if you do your brisket like this, it's gonna come out amazing. You almost can't go wrong. You almost can't mess it up with this method. So if you like this video, be sure and hit the subscribe button and catch us on the next video. Take care guys.